Welcome back, dear friends, to another exciting episode of Exploring the Advent of Divine Justice. We are on part 24, part 1. And without any further ado, dear friends, we'll have a healing prayer for all the friends that are unwell and in need of healing. Thank you so much.
Thy name is my healing, O my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing and my succor in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise. Baha'u'llah.
Beautiful, beautiful, Miss Mary. One of the interesting things about the healing prayers is all the healing prayers, I believe, are from Baha'u'llah. So that's just another factoid. So on the prayers on healing. So excellent. Let us now get into our section for today. I'm so excited. We're getting closer and closer to the end of our study together in the sense of Advent to Divine Justice. And in another class, I covered America and the Most Great Peace. And I know we haven't done this together, but we just covered it in our Clearwater class. And what was very interesting is in paragraph 38 of America and the Most Great Peace. And America's Most Great Peace was written in 1933, okay? 1933. Does anyone remember when Advent to Divine Justice was written?
1938.
Excellent, excellent, Tesfai. So 1938, so 5 years later, okay, was Advent to Divine Justice. America the Most Great Peace was the Sixth World Order letter, okay? So this was a world order letter written by the beloved Guardian in 1933, Rezvan 1933. That letter was written 40 years after the first intimation by Reverend Jessup in 1893, okay? 1893, Reverend Jessup was the first public announcement in that exhibition and pronouncing of the faith in America, 1893, right? Columbia Exposition, he mentions the faith for the first time in 1893. Now, 1933, when this letter comes out by the beloved Guardian called America and the Most Great Peace, this is 40 years after it. So in this great and masterful letter by the beloved Guardian, what does he do? He puts that 40-year span of history from 1893 to 1933 into 4 distinct decades of time. And it's so cool, okay? So he says each of these 4 decades, big events have happened in the development of the early American Baha'i community, okay? And each has had their challenges as well as their victories, okay? This is in America and the Most Great Peace. And it's a short letter. And if you want, dear friends, you are my class. If you want, we could do America and the Most Great Peace. It's a short letter. We could do that after, or we could jump into dispensation, whichever my class feels. But as we have studied paragraph 16 together, which was the early American Baha'i history, a lot of that, the challenges of the early American Baha'i history, you've already learned. So that is foundational knowledge. So it will go much faster in the sense of your knowledge of the history and the early American Baha'i community, you'll gain as we go through that pivotal document. Why did I bring American, the Most Great Peace up before even starting our class for today? Is because in this last part, this last, per se, paragraphs of the Beloved Guardian in this pivotal document, Advent to Divine Justice, the Beloved Guardian echoes paragraph 38 of American, the Most Great Peace. And what does he say? He says in paragraph 38 of American, the Most Great Peace, he says, what if this American nation doesn't rise to its challenge? What if another country, what if the European continent takes up the banner? What if, right? And he poses this question, what if? Meaning, if we as American Baha'i community does not arise, take up the gauntlet, take up the banner, hold this flag, what if? And he says it will fall to the European continent. It will fall to another. This aspect of spiritual primacy that the Beloved Guardian has constantly been hitting home, this American nation, Abdul Baha come 239 days walking this continent, the tablets of the divine plan glowing this American nation. How wonderful, how blessed is this American continent. These incredible stalwart heroes we've read about, named Martha Roots, these heroes that have poured out from this country, going pioneering here and there. What if, this is the last words, 1933, Beloved Guardian, American Most Great Peace, then echoed in Advent to Divine Justice at the end, and we're going to see this. Why I'm bringing this up so it's fresh in your memory. What if we do not play our part? It will fall to others. That is the main thing. It's so important that we have to play our part. We have to do the teaching work. We have to arise. This is so important that if we do not do our part, just because we are standing on great shoulders, we are the spiritual descendants of the Dawnbreakers. And who are the Dawnbreakers? It's not just those incredible heroes in the cradle of the faith. The Dawnbreakers are also all those valiant heroes that suffered in this land of America. And we are the descendant of them. And if we don't play our part, their sacrifices go to naught, because the faith needs us to play our part. The march of the institutions, the march of this faith, the march of the communities, it needs us. Because remember what the Beloved Guardian says, this faith it's not steady in its progression. Sometimes there's regresses and sometimes there's sudden spurts, right? Just because there might be a regress doesn't mean that we should fall back. We have to be constantly moving. Remember with the quote I shared with you last time, where the Beloved Guardian wrote to this the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada, where he says, increase your activities 1,000-fold. 1,000-fold. What we should assess what we are doing and how we can increase. And this is, what are we doing? How can we increase our heat and our flame, our fervor, our intensity, our love for Baha'u'llah, that everyone around us feels it. First, we should increase it in our families. This is the easiest of things to do, right? First, we increase this heat and flame and love for Baha'u'llah internally in ourselves. We study more, we read more, we learn more, and that love and intensity builds within us. We share that with our spouse, we share that with our children, we share that with everyone in our family. We have a family devotional. We have another family devotional. The spouse has a devotional. I attend his spouse devotional. I have a devotional. Well, they have a devotional. The children have a devotional. So then even within a family, you can have 5 or 6 devotionals. You can have devotional every day. In fact, I have 8 devotionals. I counted it every single day, 8 devotionals. Every time I'm with my wife or my children, we share prayers. So in reality, every time you're with them, it should be a moment to praise Baha'u'llah, right? Morning, night, evening, and it just becomes a natural practice. And when the cluster was trying to track these things, I'd never done it in the sense of statistics. It's just because it's natural, and it should be so natural, And I was like, how many do I have? And then I was counting my parents, and I was lost track, So the thing is, it becomes natural because you just want to do it. It's not an obligation. And same as teaching, even though it's a duty, it's just because you want to. Something that you love to do. Same as then once that fire continues in your family, right? That heat and flame, that intensity in a small community will reverberate in a small area. People will notice what is going on. Why are you having these spaces, such as devotional spaces, such as inviting friends over? I understand we're under a COVID pandemic and inviting people over, but you can always talk to people, connect to people, call people, keep people connected. And that's the love, because this faith is about love. So calling people, saying, hey, what's up? I love you. I miss you. I haven't heard from you in a while. And even sharing a prayer over the phone, that's love, And that's really what this faith is about. Or going over and dropping some food off. The other day, my wife, I segue before we get into Advent. This is just a perfect example. My wife made a big old pot of ash. I'm not sure everyone's had ash before. Ash is this Persian soup with, noodles and everything. It's pretty yummy. Anyway, my wife made this huge old pot of ash. And it was late at night after she finished cooking this thing. And this thing, it took her like all day. If you ever cooked ash, this thing is a ridiculous amount of time to cook this thing. So it's like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and she's done, right? And it's huge. And I'm like, what in God's name am I going to do with all this ash? And it was just me, my wife, and 3 little kids. It's like, what are we going to do with it? So I was like, we're going to give this to everybody we know, right? And I'm like, I'm the kind of crazy person. I called up all these Baha'is and I'm like, I'm coming over right now. I'm going to drop off this ash. It's 11 o'clock at night. It was the most awesome, wonderful experience, right? So unifying, so loving, kind of crazy going to people's houses at 11 o'clock at night and ringing a doorbell and I have a Tupperware of ash for you. But the point was, it brought love. And that's what this faith's about. Bring love. Bring it home, bring it so that people feel it, connect it, and think of concrete examples as a family. How can you bring love to others? And when we talked about enhancing diversity section, African Americans, indigenous and populations, how can you bring love home to enhance diversity in your life, in your communities, right? Bring it home. Bring that love. See, this is what this faith is about. This is what this book is we've been studying about. Bring love home. Bring it in your life. Bring it to your community. So that was my, as they say, my segue into our section tonight. So anyway, tonight we're going to have another wonderful session. I'm going to share my slides with you. So tonight we're going to be getting into paragraphs 116 through 124. So paragraph 116 in this one, it starts on page 129, okay? It starts one more word in conclusion, one more word in conclusion. It's kind of like the beloved guardian's last major points he wants to address in the Advent to Divine Justice. So he starts one more word in conclusion. And in this one, it starts right here on page 72, 72 in this one, okay? It says one more word in conclusion. And then the subheader says the destiny of America. And actually all these subheaders were eventually taken out and put into table of contents and not put into subheaders in the later editions of Advent to Divine Justice. So, but in this old text is that section starts off, the destiny of America. Okay, so let us get into reading this section so then we can start really analyzing it, okay? So our first reader, Roya John, if you could so kindly.
One more word in conclusion. Among some of the most momentous and thought-provoking pronouncements ever made by Abdu'l-Baha in the course of his epoch-making travels in the North American continent are the following. May this American democracy be the first nation to establish the foundation of international agreement. May it be the first nation to proclaim the unity of mankind. May it be the first to unfurl the standard of the most great peace. And again, the American people are indeed worthy of being the first to build the tabernacle of the great peace and proclaim the oneness of mankind. For America had developed powers and capacities greater and more wonderful than other nations. The American nation is equipped and empowered to accomplish that which will adorn the pages of history, to become the envy of the world, and be blessed in both the East and the West for the triumph of its people. The American continent gives signs and evidences of very great advancement. Its future is even more promising, for its influence and illumination are far-reaching. It will lead all nations spiritually.
Beautifully read. Thank you, Roya.
Thank you.
All right, our next reader. Miss Darla, could you read this one for us?
The creative energies mysteriously generated by the first stirrings of the embryonic world order of Baha'u'llah have, as soon as released within a nation destined to become its cradle and champion, endowed that nation with the worthiness and invested it with the powers and capacities and equipped it spiritually to play the part foreshadowed in these prophetic words. The potencies which this God-given mission has infused into its people are, on the one hand, beginning to be manifested through the conscious efforts and the nationwide accomplishments in both the teaching and administrative spheres of the Baha'i activity, of the organized community of the followers of Baha'u'llah in the North American continent. These same potencies, apart from yet collateral with these efforts and accomplishments, are, on the other hand, insensibly shaping, under the impact of the world political and economic forces, the destiny of that nation, and are influencing the lives and actions of both its government and its people.
Excellent, Ms. Darla. Thank you. Dennis, could you read this one?
Sure. To the efforts and accomplishments of those who, aware of the revelation of Baha'u'llah, are now laboring in that continent, to their present and future course of activity, I have, in the foregoing pages, sufficiently referred. A word, if the destiny of the American people in its entirety is to be correctly apprehended, should now be said regarding the orientation of that nation as a whole and the trend of the affairs of its peoples. For no matter how ignorant of the source from which those directing energies proceed, and however slow and laborious the process, it is becoming increasingly evident that the nation as a whole, whether through the agency of its government or otherwise, is gravitating into the influence of forces that it can neither comprehend nor control towards such associations and policies, wherein, as indicated by the Baha, her true destiny must lie. Both the community of the American believers who are aware of that source, and the great mass of their countrymen have not as yet recognized the hand that directs their destiny, are contributing each in its own way to the realization of the hopes and the fulfillment of the promises voiced in the above quoted words of Abdu'l-Baha.
Thank you, dear Dennis. Okay, I'll read this one. The world is moving on. Its events are unfolding ominously and with bewildering rapidity. The whirlwind of its passions is swift and alarmingly violent. The new world is being insensibly drawn into its vortex. The potential storm centers of the earth are already casting their shadows upon its shores. Dangers, undreamt of and unpredictable, threaten it both from within and from without. Its governments and peoples are being gradually enmeshed in the coils of the world's recurrent crises and fierce controversies. The Atlantic and Pacific Oceans are, with every acceleration in the march of science, steadily shrinking into mere channels. The great Republic of the West finds itself particularly and increasingly involved. Distant rumblings echo menacingly in the ebullitions of its people. On its flanks are ranged the potential storm centers of the European continent and of the Far East. On its southern horizon, there looms what might conceivably develop into another center of agitation and danger. The world is contracting into a neighborhood. America, willingly or unwillingly, must face and grapple with this new situation for purposes of national security, let alone any humanitarian motive. She must assume the obligations imposed by this newly created neighborhood. Paradoxical as it may seem, her only hope of extricating herself from the perils gathering around her is to become entangled in that very web of international association, which the hand of an inscrutable providence is weaving. Abdu'l-Baha's counsel to a highly placed official in its government comes to mind with peculiar appropriateness and force. You can best serve your country if you strive in your capacity as a citizen of the world to assist in the eventual application of the principle of federalism underlying the government of your own country to the relationships now existing between the peoples and nations of the world. The ideals that fired the imagination of America's tragically unappreciated president, whose high endeavors, however much nullified by a visionless generation, Abdu'l-Baha, through his own pen, acclaimed as signalizing the dawn of the most great peace, though now lying in the dust, bitterly reproach a heedless generation for having so cruelly abandoned them. All right. Miss Marianne, if you could read paragraph 120.
That the world is beset with perils, that dangers are now accumulating and are actually threatening the American nation, no clear-eyed observer can possibly deny. The earth is now transformed into an armed camp. As much as 50 million men are either under arms or in reserve. No less than the sum of 3 billion pounds is being spent in 1 year on its armaments. The light of religion is dimmed and moral authority disintegrating. The nations of the world have, for the most part, fallen a prey to battling ideologies that threaten to disrupt the very foundations of their dearly won political unity. Agitated multitudes in these countries seethe with discontent, are armed to the teeth, are stampeded with fear, and groan beneath the yoke of tribulations engendered by political strife, racial fanaticism, national hatreds, and religious animosities. The winds of despair, Baha'u'llah has unmistakably affirmed, are, alas, blowing from every direction, and the strife that divides and afflicts the human race is daily increasing. The signs of impending convulsions and chaos can now be discerned. The ills Abdu'l-Baha, writing as far back as 2 decades ago, has prophesied, from which the world now suffers, will multiply. The gloom which envelops it will deepen. The Balkans will remain discontented.
Thank you. Okay. Miss Claudia, could you continue, please?
Okay. Its restlessness will increase. The vanquished powers will contribute to agitate. They will resort to every measure that may rekindle the flame of war. Movements, newly born and worldwide in their range, will exert their utmost for the advancement of their designs. The movement of the left will acquire great importance. Its influence will spread. As to the American nation itself, the voice of its own president, emphatic and clear, warns his people that a possible attack upon their country has been brought infinitely closer by the development of aircraft and other factors. Its Secretary of State addressing at a recent conference the assembled representatives of all the American republics, utters no less ominous a warning. These resurgent forces loom threateningly throughout the world. Their ominous shadow falls athwart over our own hemisphere.
Athwart.
I'm not the word athwart in there.
Yeah, athwart.
Athwart, okay. Athwart, oh, okay, athwart our own hemisphere. As to its press, the same note of warning and of alarm at approaching danger is struck. We must be prepared to defend ourselves both from within and without. Our defensive frontier is long. It reaches from Alaska's Point Barrow to Cape Horn and ranges the Atlantic and the Pacific. When or where Europe's and Asia's aggressions may strike at us in no time, no one can say. If it could be anywhere, anytime, it could be anywhere, anytime. We have no option save to go armed ourselves. We must mount vigilant guard over the Western Hemisphere.
Thank you. Thank you very well, Red. Okay. Miss Donna, could you read paragraph 121?
The distance that the American nation has traveled since its formal and categoric repudiation of the Wolffian idea, the changes that have unexpectedly undertaken it in recent years, the direction in which world events are moving, with their inevitable impact on the policies and the economy of that nation, are to every Baha'i observer during the developments in the international situation in the light of the prophecies of both Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha, most significant and highly instructive and encouraging. To trace the exact course which in these troubled times and pregnant years this nation will follow will be impossible. We can only, judging from the direction its affairs are now taking, anticipate the course she will most likely choose to pursue in her relationships with both the republics of America and the countries of the remaining continents.
Beautifully read, Miss Donna. Thank you. All right. Now we're at paragraph 122. Okay. Dear Tesfa, are you with us?
Yes.
Hey, go for it.
Okay. A closer association with these republics on the one hand, and an increased participation in varying degrees on the other in the affairs of the whole world as a result of the recurrent international crisis appear as the most likely developments which the future has in store for that country. Delays must inevitably arise. Setbacks must be suffered in the course of that country's evolution towards its ultimate destiny. Nothing, however, can alter eventually that course ordained far it by the unerring pen of Abdu'l-Baha. Its federal unity having already been achieved, and the initial institutions, the internal institutions, consolidated a state that makes its coming of age as a political entity. Its further evolution as a member of the family of nations must, under circumstances that cannot at present be visualized, steadily continue. Such an evolution must persist until such time when that nation will, through the active and decisive part it will have played in the organization and the peaceful settlements of the affairs of mankind, have attained the plenitude of its powers and functions as an outstanding member and component part of a federated world.
Very well read, dear Tesfa. There's hard words in there. Very well read. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't see it very well, but it's okay. Thank you.
Very well, thank you. Okay, Miss Luann, if you could read this one for us.
The immediate future must, as a result of this steady, this gradual and inevitable absorption in the manifold perplexities and problems afflicting humanity, be dark and oppressive for that nation. The world-shaking ordeal which Baha'u'llah, as quoted in the foregoing pages, has so graphically prophesied. Many find it sweep to an unprecedented degree into its vortex. Out of it will probably emerge, unlike its reaction to the last world conflict, consciously determined to seize its opportunity to bring the full weight of its influence to bear upon the gigantic problems that such an ordeal must leave in its wake, and to exercise forever, in conjunction with its sister nations of both the East and the West, the greatest curse which from time immemorial has afflicted and degraded the human race.
Thank you, Miss Luann. All right, and our last paragraph. Aruna, could you read this one for us? Aruna, are you there? Might not have. Okay, Miss Gabrielle, if you could so kindly read this one for us.
Then and only then will the American nation, molded and purified in the crucible of the common war, unerred to its figures, and disciplined by its lessons, be in a position to raise its voice in the councils of the nations, itself lay in the cornerstone of a universal and enduring peace, proclaim the solidarity, the unity and maturity of mankind, and assist in the establishment of the promised reign of righteousness on earth. Then and only then will the American nation, while the community of the American believers within its heart is consummating its divinely appointed mission, be able to fulfill the unspeakably glorious destiny ordained for it by the Almighty and immortally enshrined in the writings of Abdu'l-Baha. Then and only then will the American nation accomplish that which will adorn the pages of history, become the envy of the world, and be both the blessed of the East and the West. December 25, 1938. Show you.
There we are, dear friends. That is paragraphs 116 through 124 that we
That's
just.
his signature? Is that Shogi's signature?
That is the beloved guardian's signature. That's correct, Shori.
Yeah,
That is his signature. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so this is the paragraphs that we just read, where the beloved guardian is now stating one more word in conclusion. And he's now addressing this American democracy, this continent of the United States of America. And he's addressing this country and saying they are not just setbacks and problems that will be coming before you. And he's in this first paragraph, he brings to mind those extracts that were quoted by Abdu'l-Baha. And we actually studied those extracts, if you recall, when Abdu'l-Baha was in San Francisco. And he said, "May it be the first nation to proclaim the unity of mankind. May it be the first to unfurl the standard of the most great peace." And he was in San Francisco when he made that proclamation. And the state of California, and it was in Sacramento, that he was in Sacramento at the time, and it was San Francisco where it was the site of the first bringing together of the United Nations, if you recall. And then it was later, its seat is in the United Nations in New York. So this was, the Beloved Guardian is quoting this. And also, this was also quoted also in America in the Most Great Peace. So this is a very pivotal and important address, this talk that Abdu'l-Baha gave in Sacramento. And so was the coming together of the calling upon that let this country, let this nation proclaim the unity of mankind. Let this great American country, this American democracy. It was very important, and that the Beloved Guardian quotes it in several different places. So this was paragraph 116. Then paragraph 117, the Beloved Guardian continues talking about these creative energies that have been mysteriously generated by this embryonic world order of Baha'u'llah, have been released within a nation, destined to become its cradle and champion. So this nation is destined to be the champion. Endow that nation with the worthiness and invested it with the powers, the capacities, and equipped it spiritually to play the part foreshadowed in these prophetic words. So here is talking about that these creative energies, and we've talked about these energies that have been released, these transformative energies that have been released by the coming of the twin manifestations. So these creative energies have been mysteriously and have been generated by the first stirrings of this embryonic faith. And what is this first stirrings of this embryonic faith? What is it talking about? This first stirrings. It's talking about the institutions here, this mysteriously generated by the first stirrings of this embryonic world order of Baha'u'llah. We have such a embryonic emergence of this National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada, and their sacrifices, their heroism, their immediate obediences and love in this community, generated through their such an incredible powers through that released within this nation, this new vitality, this energy through this new organism that is this Baha'i community, American Baha'i community. So this is and it is invested with powers, capacities, equipped it spiritually, and it is through these prophetic words. The potencies which this God-given mission has infused into its people are, on the one hand, beginning to be manifested through the conscious efforts and the nationwide accomplishments in both the teaching and administrative spheres of Baha'i activities of the organized communities of the followers of Baha'u'llah in the North American continent. So it's just beginning to be manifested. Okay? It's just like a little sapling just emerging out of the soil, and it's just emerging, these powers, these potencies, these capacities of this incredible American Baha'i community. And I just want to share something. We've read countless examples of the stellar nature of this American Baha'i community. And I was in a different session, and one of the friends happened to be from Europe and was like, why is it always America, 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 right? And interestingly, this question came to Abdul Baha too. And His Holiness Abdul Baha, after his incredible travels to America, 239 days. He goes back to for a respite. A resting period in Egypt, right? So he's resting there after his really exhausting travels, and you can read how tiresome they were. I mean, there was one point when he reached Germany, and he was just collapsing. He was so tired. He couldn't even. He was getting sick. He really was getting really sick during his travels, but eventually got to Egypt. And one of the there's in Abdul Baha in Egypt, he would sit down with his Persian entourage. He always have a bunch of these loving friends always around him, and he would sit down in the evenings and he would share his talks. And Mirza Ahmad Sohrab obviously later on became a covenant breaker, but during the writing of Abdul Baha in Egypt was a good recording. It's fine, right? So, but Mirza Ahmad Sohrab was recording Abdul Baha's talks here, and how often did Abdul Baha share his memoirs of his travels to America and to the Persian friends? He would constantly recollect. He would say how glorious the American friends were. I went to this church. I went to this synagogue. I went here and I went there. The American Baha'i community are just incredible. And this is in Abdul Baha in Egypt. And then there's this one glowing encounter, just one after another. He's saying, I went and did this and I went and did that. And he was sharing his highlights of his travels, of his trip to the Persian friends. Then one of the friends asked him, he says, why America? What about Europe? What about these other places, right? Why America, right? And this is amazing. I mean, anyone anywhere else in the world should be per se jealous. And it's in Abdul Baha in Egypt. The beloved master says, and I'll share it with the class, but I'm going to give my own words and I'll share the exact extract with the class. But in my own words, he says, Europe got nothing on America. It's in a league of its own. It's like this, and in my own words, it's like the small, little putt-putt, people playing putt-putt and then playing against the PGA, in the sense of the Professional Golf Association, in the sense of league. It's in a world of its own, is America. And that is from Abdul Baha, you see? In the sense, obviously, Abdul Baha doesn't mention PGA and putt-putt. That was Ehsan's words. But in the sense of the distance and of scale of difference between the European continent and America and its spiritual destiny, that is mentioned in Abdul Baha in Egypt. And so he says there is no comparison. That's from Abdul Baha's history. There's no comparison. And I'll share that with the class because it's so cool to see, wow, what a privilege to be an American Baha'i, but and in the words of the movie Spider-Man, with great powers comes great responsibility. So we are here in this continent being invested with these powers and capacities as being American Baha'is, right? We're being invested with it, being American Baha'is. But with great powers comes great responsibility. And we have to arise. So this was paragraph 117. Now, coming up, we reach now to 118. We continued. And this was addressing to the efforts and accomplishments of those who are aware of this revelation of Baha'u'llah, are now laboring in that continent to their present and future course of activity. So I have in the foregoing pages sufficiently referred, talking about all the pioneers, talking about the members of the administration. But he says a word of the destiny of the American people in its entirety, meaning even the greater society, he feels he needs to address. Okay, so he's talked to address the American Baha'i community. Now he wants to address the general community. Okay, for no matter how ignorant of the source from which those directing energies proceed, and however slow and laborious this process, it is becoming increasingly evident that this nation as a whole, whether through the agency of its government or otherwise, is gravitating, what happened? Is gravitating under the influence of forces that it can neither comprehend nor control towards such associations and policies wherein, as indicated by Abdu'l-Baha, her true destiny must lie. Both the community of the American believers who are aware of that source and the great mass of their countrymen who have not as yet recognized the hand that directs their destiny are contributing each in its own way to the realization of the hopes and the fulfillment of the promises voiced in the above quoted words of Abdu'l-Baha. He's saying very simply, very emphatically, that this American nation, whether they are aware of it or not, this American nation is moving towards its destiny. It's like gravity. You cannot fight it. Whether you agree with it or not, it's there. The destiny of America is there. And this country is moving towards its ultimate spiritual destiny. And so this is the reality. The world is moving on. Its events are unfolding ominously and with bewildering rapidity. So remember the time, 1938. 9 months later, the first guns are fired in September of 1939. So this is the coming of World War II. The Beloved Guardian is foreshadowing the events coming. I mean, remember the Beloved Guardian. What an incredible historian, as well as per se sociologist, knowing what is going on in the world, always reading, always studying. So he knew what was coming. He's saying the world is moving on. The events are unfolding ominously and with bewildering rapidity. The whirlwind of its passions is swift and alarmingly violent. The new world is being insensibly drawn into its vortex. The new world meaning the United States of America. It's being drawn into its vortex. The potential storm centers of the earth are already casting their shadows upon its shores. Dangers undreamt of and unpredictable threaten it both from within and from without. Its governments and peoples are being gradually enmeshed in the coils of the world's recurrent crises and fierce controversies. If you recall from your days when you were in history classes a long time ago, this American nation tried the policy of isolationism. It tried even to stay out of any type of enmeshment in other countries' dealings. Even recently, in a past administration, we had America First. make America great again, and these kind of things, just focusing as on America. This is an isolationism type of doctrine, to only focus on this nation and ignore the role of the American destiny of where having its role in the entire world. This is the destiny of America, is to have a role in the entire destiny of the entire world. So, as mentioned, these storms, these world conflicts were emerging, and the beloved guardian is highlighting them. It says the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans are, with every acceleration in the march of science, steadily shrinking into mere channels. This is 1938. Now we have airplanes. So he's saying these great oceans that it wasn't too long ago that they would traverse them with steam, the steamships. And even before that, it was sail ships. And now we can traverse these oceans in mere hours. It's an incredible accomplishment due to time. And he's saying these great oceans, due to science, are steadily shrinking into mere channels. The great Republic of the West finds itself particularly and increasingly involved. So now we're getting enmeshed, we're becoming interwoven and cannot separate. For example, any crisis on the Hang Seng, the markets in the Asian markets, if happening overnight, if the Hang Seng or any of the Asian markets, suddenly anything happens, tomorrow we wake up, our Dow Jones or the in the New York Stock Exchange or any of these economic indices will suddenly crash if anything bad happens in the Asian economies, because we are intrinsically interwoven. Our economies are so connected now. So this is showing how we are really one now. Our economies are tied, our countries are tied, our interests are tied, our mineral interests are tied. For example, we cannot do any businesses with any of these countries unless we think of all the elements. For example, if we do business with Venezuela or any countries in the Middle East or China, we have to think about all the elements of trade. And one of the trades is also mineral interests, so we have to think about all the elements of not just what will this do, and how will it impact the deal. There's so many elements now tied because these countries are so intrinsically linked together now. May not be united. A lot of these countries think about themselves first, but they are so linked that they cannot be separated, isolationist type of mentalities anymore, because that will be harmful not only to their own interests, but also to the world interests. And we've seen how even the mentalities of, I want to be isolationist, but that all hurts their own country, but it also hurts the world in the sense, having that kind of mentality. And so here we see this, in the beloved guardian even mentions this. He says, the world is contracting into a neighborhood. America willingly or unwillingly must face and grapple with this new situation for purposes of national security, let alone any humanitarian motive. She must assume the obligations imposed by this newly created neighborhood. Paradoxical as it may seem, her only hope of extricating herself from the perils gathering around her is to become entangled in that very web, of international association, which the hand of an inscrutable providence is weaving. The only way to extricate yourself is to get even more entangled. That's very interesting. If you strive in your capacity as a citizen of the world to assist in the eventual application of the principle of federalism, we're going to find out what this federalism is, underlying the government of your own country, to the relationships now existing between the peoples and nations of the world. The ideals that fire the imaginations of America's tragically unappreciated president. And we're going to talk about this Woodrow Wilson, the unappreciated president, whose high endeavors, however much nullified by a visionless generation. And this is his 14 points. And the visionless generation pretty much ignored that. And actually in several places, and actually I have a video and I'll show the class this, that if they accepted the Wilsonian ideals, and this is a historian saying, if they accepted his 14 points, the war would not have happened. The Great War, World War II, would not have happened. Isn't that incredible? Because this is because of the Wilsonian ideals. But the beloved guardian says, this Abdu'l-Baha, through his own pen, Abdu'l-Baha affirms, says the dawn of the most great peace, though now lying in the dust, bitterly reproach a heedless generation for having so cruelly abandoned them. This action of Woodrow Wilson was the signalizing of the dawn of the most great peace. That is how powerful and important his action was. It's the signalizing of the dawn of the most great peace. So then we carry on paragraph 120. This American nation. And here the beloved guardian is saying this country is like an armed camp. Armed camp, right? Accumulating and threatening this American nation. No clear-eyed observer can possibly deny. The earth is now transformed into an armed camp. 50 million men are either under arms or reserve, no less than the sum of 3 billion pounds. And as the friends were reading this, I want to share an insight because it was the first time I heard it, in the sense, because when others read it, brings thoughts. So I want to share an insight, and I just want to make sure I'm in the right paragraph. Is dimmed. The nations of the world have, for the most part, fallen a prey to battling ideologies that threaten to disrupt the very foundations, the winds of despair, the ills. The Balkans will be discontented. It's in this paragraph. Let me move. Here we go. As to the American nation itself, the voice of its own president. The voice of its own president. Emphatic and clear warns his people that a possible attack upon their country has been brought infinitely closer by the development of aircraft and by other factors. If anyone remembers, not to say that this is a prophecy or anything, but if anyone remembers how United States entered into the war of World War II, it was the attack on Pearl Harbor, right? And that was by the development of aircraft. And so here the beloved guardian is saying, as to the American nation itself, the voice of its own president, emphatic and clear, warns his people that a possible attack upon their country has brought infinitely closer by the development of aircraft and by other factors. That was just my own personal observation and reading of hearing it being read. And so it's here even the beloved guardian is saying that the crises, these wars are being brought to your shores. You cannot be isolationist anymore, sitting in your own golden towers, as you say, just and watching the world get ever worse and you need to have an active role in the destiny of the world. Here, this is what the beloved guardians say. Okay, and so we read all of these paragraphs. Let's get back into our analysis. Okay, so that was just my own personal thoughts. Any thoughts from any of the friends, insights before we get into further study? Did any of these paragraphs hit you home or make you think of anything at this point before we continue?
You know, from my point of observation, that all these destinies of America, champions and everything that Abdul Baha and the Guardians said, only the Baha'is that we understand once we become Baha'i, but the rest of the world, the veto power and all the leaders of the world, do you think they understand that America's destiny of the future, that spiritually we are leading the world? If they know, they might be flourish to America, everybody.
Very good, dear Tesfai. Of course, even the beloved guardian says, whether they know or they don't know, it doesn't really matter in that sense, because the destiny of America is its destiny. And it will, it is, as I mentioned, it's like gravity. You cannot argue against it. You know, it will come. And it is on the American Baha'i community to fulfill and to bring about. But this is the priceless heritage that we have been gifted as the American Baha'i community to fulfill. And as, the leaders and of other countries and of this country are unaware, but it doesn't really matter whether they are or not. That doesn't change anything. And so, but it's but as Baha'is, if we are aware, if we have accepted this faith, then it is upon us to arise. It is upon us to play our part. Really, that's really all I can say on that, dear Tesfai.
Yeah, what I'm saying, in other words, that all the people of the world, if they know this bounty and blessing and the grace of God, they might become Baha'i. In other words, that's what I'm saying, try to visualize if the humanity can understand. But the only thing is this book is only for the Baha'is, or this secret, so they don't have a chances or access to read and understand and follow these messages, unless and otherwise it be broadcast all over the world through the media or through House of Justice or any other means of communication.
Well, granted, the messages of the beloved guardian, this was written specific to the North American Baha'i community, right? When the beloved guardian was in the opening of this letter, it says to the Baha'is, it says, to the beloved of God and the handmaids of the merciful throughout the United States and Canada. So this is written to the North American Baha'i community. So this is who the beloved guardian is addressing. And it's to the beloved of the God and the handmaids of the merciful, namely the Canadian and United States Baha'i communities. So you're correct in your sense, this was written to the Baha'i communities. But as you can see in his language in several places, that it's not directly even to the Baha'is. You can see how he's in this sense, he's writing to about the greater society. What crisis is going to be faced by the greater society. And you're right, dear Tesfai. If the greater society saw these and opened their inner eye, and saw these what these crises were in and not just in their material effects, but the spiritual effects of turning away from the manifestation of God and how these crises that are afflicting humanity is really, in essence, the wrath of the Lord for failure to turn towards him. And this is the really the judgment from our Lord, and that we have to turn towards our Lord and understand that all of these crises are designed for the awakening of humanity. And understand that this is part of the disintegrative processes. And we're going to get into that in this section, actually, that this is part of the disintegration that the hand of God is doing to wake up humanity. It has to, I mean, humanity has been slumbering and so to wake up humanity, God is, if someone is really asleep, what do? You raise your voice, you shout. If that person's still asleep, what do the alarm goes off, that person's still asleep. Eventually God says, I even had the trumpeters, and they came in the clouds, and there were the buglers and everything. All of those blasts have been done. The announcements have been done. Now is the time for splashing of water in the face, as they say. And this is where the crises come. And this is because humanity has turned a blind eye. And even further, in the land of his birth, and they have oppressed the community and caused persecution against the community. So this is all part and parcel of this process of disintegration. So we're going to explore this. This is and
may I say some points here?
Please, dear Tesfaye, and then we'll continue. Okay?
Yeah, from the writings, maybe you might correct me. I don't know, because what I heard from the Guardian is at one point that he said that in the future the time will come that the Baha'i faith is going to be given as in a school, in a school that is going to be as education for the faith of the Baha'i faith. And then in the other writings also, in Baha'u'llah says also, in the future, the day will come that all the leaders, they come together, they decided to choose, and then one religion. Because of the religion we are fighting and no peace and then war all the time, and they try to choose and they choose the Baha'i faith. That is somewhere in their writings, but I don't know where it is. The Baha'u'llah says, but if you come across, maybe you can give me more detail.
Thank you, dear Tesfaye. Thank you. As to your points on those, first I will go to Miss Gabrielle. She has a hand, and then we'll move on. Thank you, Miss Gabrielle.
I just wanted to add to that comment. In New South Wales, we've been running Baha'i classes in schools now for 20 or 30 years. So it does happen in some places. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so these are the final paragraphs of the Advent of Divine Justice, paragraphs 116 through 124. And in these paragraphs, the beloved guardian is now focusing on the future and destiny of the American nation to become the first nation to build the tabernacle of the great peace and proclaim the oneness of mankind, to lead all nations spiritually, as foretold by Abdu'l-Baha. The beloved guardian, Shoghi Effendi, explains that their role will unfold through various stages. Two factors that will force this American nation to abandon its current isolationism. On the one hand, the continuing deterioration in the world political situation. And on the other hand, the advances in travel and communication that will bridge the distances between the American continent and the other parts of the world. So here the beloved guardian is saying two things will end this ideology of isolationism that the American nation has picked up. The immediate factor for America will be dark. The immediate future for America will be dark and oppressive. Through the crises prophesied by Baha'u'llah, this nation will emerge determined to seize its opportunity, and in conjunction with its sister nations in both the East and the West, will solve the colossal problems of the world. So, dear friends, let's get through some of these key points, and I'm checking my time. We'll get through these key points and we'll close it off for tonight, okay? The capacities and powers of America have been generated as the result of the creative energies of the world order of Baha'u'llah released within this nation. This is thanks be to His Holiness Abdul Baha. Thanks to the sacrifices of these incredible heroes and heroines that we are the spiritual descendants of, that from Martha Root to all these incredible National Spiritual Assembly members, from Corinne True to Horace Holly, that really we are so indebted to them. The God-given capacities conferred on the American nation are manifested through two distinctive processes. The followers of Baha'u'llah in America manifest these capacities by building the Baha'i administrative order and teaching the faith. The same capacities affect the American government and its people and shape the destiny of the nation under the influence of world political and economic forces. So there's two distinctive processes at play. We're going to talk about this. One distinctive process is directly addressing the followers of Baha'u'llah in America and manifest these capacities by building this Baha'i administrative order and teaching the cause. The second one is another twin process, and this twin process is directly affecting this American government, its people, and shaping the destiny, the spiritual destiny of the whole nation at large. Abdul Baha advised a very high government official that the best way for him to serve his country was to contribute towards applying the principle of federalism underlying the American government to the nations of the world. And President Woodrow Wilson was considerably influenced by the Baha'i teachings. And he was also, as mentioned, the unappreciated president. The beloved guardian identifies the dangers threatening the world in connection with the looming Second World War. After the dark period, the American nation will raise its voice in the councils of the nations and lay the cornerstone of universal peace, proclaiming the unity of mankind and becoming the example of the prophecies of Abdul Baha. So there we are, dear friends. We're at 8:28. Hey, this is a long section. I didn't want to jump into a complete new section and then end too early. So there we are, dear friends. That is our paragraphs for tonight. We read 116 through 124. Next session, we're going to get into really start analyzing, as always. And I encourage you all again to reread these paragraphs and think of your own questions and and discussion points, because this is our last per se section. And this is now the beloved guardian. All prior, the whole text prior really was directly addressing the American Baha'i community, right? And for the majority part of it is the internal battle. Really, rectitude of conduct, chaste and holy life, freedom from racial prejudices. Then we get into the entire section on teaching, right? Talking about pioneering and all equipping ourselves for pioneering. So that whole that section is about transformation of here and here, right? So when your exposition will affect the heart. Now, this is where in paragraph 116, he says, I have one more word in conclusion. He wants to directly address the American nation as a whole. How does he see this American continent? What is happening at that point in current time? The country was literally about to enter into a war. Its president was having this isolationism ideology to stay out of any conflicts and just stay. And so he is writing as from, how it is from per se on observing, someone observing the whole scene and not just writing to the Baha'i community. So it's very interesting in this last section to see how the beloved guardian is writing here. And so I encourage you again to reread it. We're going to really study it coming up. We'll also watch a video to get a better understanding of the President Woodrow Wilson, and what an incredible figure he was. Also, sure, he was influenced he was influenced by the racist ideologies that were current at that time. In fact, almost every president was. I mean, truly. I mean, maybe only President Obama. And out of all the presidents, and not to be political on any level, but really, if you look at the entire panoply of all presidents, you will see and really study who they were, their lives, and all their histories, and what they did, and what you will probably see how racism characterized their policies, their actions, their words, their deeds, and everything. And that's a reality of the history of our country. And even then, I don't want to say President Obama was not racist. I haven't studied his entire life, and all his policies, but I'm just saying, but this is it's very clear in all of the other ones. You follow? So especially, and Woodrow Wilson it's also very easy to, characterize that based upon, they used his sound bites in The Birth of a Nation. Okay. That was a movie that was designed to catapult the Ku Klux Klan. And so they used his sound bites. In fact, the first airing of Birth of a Nation was in the White House, and so that was the first public viewing of that racist propaganda movie. And it was the first big popular movie ever done. And it was viewed in the White House. So yeah, he wasn't, I'm not saying he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He may have been, but there's no record per se, but he was an advocate and a supporter, okay? And so but everything he did for the support of bringing about peace, Abdu'l-Baha praised, the beloved guardian praised. That is the point. Not that it's very rare to have a comprehensive and wonderful person overall, and that the beloved guardian praised him for that specific thing. You follow? And that is really what all across our nation, statues of Woodrow Wilson were torn down in this recent George Floyd episode and this atrocity. And because he was considered a racist president, a president that really upheld segregation in our country. And you can read the history on it. And he did. And so that's why statues were torn down from him. But the reality of what he did for the advancement of peace is what Abdu'l-Baha praised, what the beloved guardian praised. And that's something that as Baha'is, we have to understand and know of this president. In fact, he is probably the greatest, unfortunately, one of the greatest president that we have, in the sense, because of his massive push, in the sense of when it says what he did for the advancement of peace, by in a time period when no one cared about peace, no one even tried for peace. What he did by trying to advance those 14 points was when I think about it, I think of the flare gun. You know, what Wilson did was he launched the flare gun for the announcement of the most great peace. That's what he did. He was the flare gun and saying the dawn of the era of the most great peace has come. The time has come. That was what Woodrow Wilson did. That's why it was so significant. But any other thoughts, comments? I didn't want to get too, into political or there's so many other great minds here, and I didn't want to even get into that per se conversation. But I wanted to mention that if I ever mention that this one is not racist or this is racist, they're pretty much were all across the board. It's just the time and place. Historically, that's what it was. Any other comments or thoughts? If not, the hour is approaching late, and as always, it's such a pleasure being in your company every session. We probably will finish this entire thing up in 2 sessions. So 2 more sessions. We will finish part 24. And then I'm thinking, dear friends, we'll have a break and give you a break maybe of 1 or 2 sessions, okay? Maybe 2-week break. Let's do a 2-week break. And then we'll come back together for dispensation, okay? So let us do that. And without any further ado, I'm going to call on eeny, meeny, miny, Mo. And the Mo is my dear friend, Dennis. And you're the lucky prayer reader for tonight as our closing prayer, just because I always see Miss Mary laughing there, and it always makes me happy seeing that. I love it. I love it. I love it. It always makes me happy to see such joy. I love it. I love every one of you, and truly it makes my weeks being in your company. Have a wonderful evening, and have a great evening, you guys.
Okay. Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy laws. Help them, O God, in their endeavor, and grant them the strength to serve thee. O God, lead them not to themselves. Guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord.
Thank you, dear Dennis. Thank you so much, every one of you guys. Have a wonderful week.
All right. Allah,
Allah.
Love.